Whenever I'm reviewing an isekai, I sort of feel obligated to point out what's different with this one, because there's a lot of them coming out, and a fair few are a bit formulaic. Anyways, the one I'm reviewing today does have the overplayed NEET before reincarnation, godly warrior after thing as its basic premise. Fun. So, why is it worth mentioning? Well, post-reincarnation, our protagonist's parental figures are a ghost, a skeleton, and a mummy, and he gets raised in the ruins of a city with not a living soul in sight. Not exactly a classic starting point for a new life. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present my review of The Faraway Paladin. Post that interesting starting point, where does the story go from there? Well, the first arc is largely watching our protagonist William grow up under the loving care of his ghost granddad Gus, skeleton daddy Blood, and mummy mommy Mary, teaching him wizardry, the way of the warrior, and piety respectively. He then leaves the nest, finds out what's happened with human civilization, slays some monsters, becomes a feudal lord, reenacts the events of The Hobbit, and does some more feudal lordy stuff. Yeah, that pretty much is everything. There isn't really much of an overarching story to Faraway Paladin, we're just following William as he lives out his life, whether that's drinking with buddies in a bar, trying to solve a currency shortage, or fighting wyverns. Often in fantasy settings, this type of episodic storytelling tends to go hand in hand with a plot where the protagonist is continually traveling and walking from one story beat to the next. Here though, our protagonist more or less has arrived at his destination by the end of the second volume and has put down roots. As such, the problems need to come to him, and when the story finally comes off hiatus, I'll be interested to see what comes William's way next. And yeah, before mentioning anything else about why you might or may not want to read this series, it is worth noting that the series has been on hiatus for 4 years. The author has announced that he's working on the next volume, but who knows when we'll actually see it. The first arc of Faraway Paladin is crazy good. Why? Parents. Blood, Mary, and Gus are all well-written characters and have great chemistry with each other. I would happily read prequel volumes with their adventures before they became undead if the author were to ever write them. None of them have parenting experience before Will, but they all try their best to raise him, and the family dynamics are quite wholesome. Even after Will leaves home, his parents continue to remain in his thoughts, and their teachings play a large role in shaping who Will is in his second life. When so many light novels either don't mention parents, have dead parents, or deadbeat parents, it's great to see a story where parents are actually positive role models. The world building in this story is also top notch. Starting in a ruined city with no idea if there's any other living beings, or any idea of how the rules of this world work, we gradually get to watch the world unfurl before us through Will's eyes, and the world that we discover is certainly an original one. Just to zoom in on one aspect, let's take a look at the magic system as an example. Words of creation involve speaking or writing the language of the gods to create an effect. All words of this language have power, and all modern languages are corruptions of this original language so that people can speak without accidentally casting magic. If you want to write about magic, you have to slightly corrupt characters so they don't accidentally trigger. As mispronunciations or sloppy writing of words can cause spells to backfire, magic users tend to avoid using them when they don't have to, and apply spells as efficiently as possible. Also tied into this is that if you lie, it will weaken the effects of your words, so no sorcerer will ever lie, though they may mislead. I'm just skimming the surface of how words of creation work, and it's not even the only system of magic. There's also elementalism and benediction. The author has put a great deal of thought into how all the different systems he's put into the world mesh together, and it makes it very easy to fall into the world he's created. So I only have one real complaint with the story, but it's a big one: the characters. After the first story arc, there is not a single character who's introduced who manages to both be well developed and likable. Now, if Will was oozing with charisma, maybe things would still work out, but he's not. Will is very much a goody two-shoes, I'm here to save the day protagonist. In the first volume, that was fine, because Blood, Gus, and Mary all compensate for him. But after that, there's no one to fill their roles. Sure, the author introduces Menel, a foul-mouthed elf, as Will's new bestie, but I never felt all that invested in the chemistry between the two characters. Actually, Menel is quite obnoxious, and all the characters post-Menel are even worse. Not that they're more obnoxious, they just get even less development. One of Will's new companions, Raistov the Penetrator, is a prime example of this. Porn star name aside, he's about as boring a character as they come. The author was clearly going for the strong and silent type with Raistov, but took it way too far. He scarcely says anything worthy of note until 3 volumes after he was introduced, and only then because there was a short story devoted to him. Up till volume 5, he could have just been a golem or a robot with good sword skills for all the difference that it would have made to the story. A big thing for me in stories is being invested in the developing relationships between characters, and so far, the only relationships I've cared about were between Will and his parents. Anyone else could die and not a tear would be shed. Part of this is just there's been too much time devoted to fighting and not enough downtime for the characters to just talk and grow. In the 5th volume, which was actually a series of short stories about how Will passed one winter, the author started to flesh out some of the character relationships, and it was the most invested I'd been in the series since the first arc. If, when the 6th volume finally drops, the author manages to keep this up, I'll have a lot more kind things to say about this story going forwards. All in all, I really enjoyed Volume 1 of Faraway Paladin, and Volume 5 too. The middle volumes were okay. Despite that, I would still recommend reading the first volume. The story in that volume is self-contained and doesn't require you to read the rest of the series. If you absolutely love Volume 1, give the rest of the series a try, but do so with the knowledge that the quality is not consistent throughout. If you've already read The Faraway Paladin and are looking for something similar to read, I would recommend Mushoku Tensei, which is an absolute god-tier isekai with some similarly deep world building to this story. Anyways, thank you all for listening to this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers!